Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Good Dram Show with me, Chris Goodrum. Right, okay, it's time to have another look at America, I think. As you know, I tasted American whiskies for this year's World Whisky Awards, so let's keep on working through some of those samples. And today we're going to look at four different whiskies that are obviously from America, but are not bourbon, i.e. they're not from Kentucky. So this should be quite interesting. I mean, these are what is commonly termed as American micro distilleries, and over the last sort of 5 or 6 years there seems to have been an absolute explosion in these distilleries. They're popping up practically all over the place, and I've written about them on a few occasions, and the biggest issue I have with these distilleries is that they're releasing their spirit far too young. Now, yeah, okay, I mean there's a commercial implication in any sort of new distillery, as you well know, and obviously there's a need to get some cash in pretty quickly, and pretty much all of them will, produce a non-aged spirit, a moonshine, or a white dog, or whatever you want to call it, which is one way of bringing in the money. But like I said, the biggest problem is that they obviously want to get their spirit, their proper spirit, out to market, and so practically as soon as it's legal, like about 3 years old, it gets whacked in a bottle and out it goes. And there's these spirits, probably the most divisive of spirits that I think that within the whiskey industry as a whole. You have people that sort of love the sort of youthful intensity of these kind of spirits, and then you have others that sort of like think, well, yeah, okay, but it's not really giving me an awful lot. It's just a bit heavy going. It's a bit hard. It's a bit spirity, and to be honest with you, I fall into that camp. I mean, I find a lot of these spirits really quite hard work. They've just not had long enough time in the cask to evolve and mature and sort of gain some kind of character. They're just too hard work. I mean, personally, I think that the High West Distillery has kind of got it right, and purists, I guess, probably may argue the toss about it, but the fact that they've decided, they realised that they didn't want to release just a sort of like an immature spirit. They bought in old rye whiskey that had been distilled by other people, and certainly with regards to the double rye that they do, vatted in their own spirit into it, so it kind of had a nice balance between the sort of youthful rye-like intensity and sort of it had a kind of core of mature spirit, which was really interesting. Like I said, I mean, a lot of purists would argue that it's not really the essence of the distillery itself, because they've bought in this spirit. But I, on the other hand, would argue that what they're producing is a better quality product at the end of the day. And that there lies the line, shall we say, the line between sort of producing a good quality product and producing a product that's indicative of the style of the distillery. And I think you're basically going to have people that basically sit on both sides of the fence with regards to that. So anyway, I guess that's enough of that, and hopefully this little tasting will either highlight that or not, as the case may be. It's been a while since I've tasted them, and it'll be interesting to go back to them again. So without further ado, I shall introduce this afternoon's lineup. Right, okay, so let's have a look at this afternoon's little range then, shall we? We'll be kicking off with this one, which is the Hudson 4-grain, bottled at 46%, distilled at the Tut Hilton Spirit Distillery in New York. Apparently it's the first distillery since Prohibition in New York. Interesting, as it's called the 4-grain. It's distilled from, would you believe it, 4 grains. It's corn, rye, malted barley and wheat. So it's the the holy pantheon, I guess, of American distilling. So that should be hopefully interesting. And it's doesn't have an age statement as none of these do. So it'll be interesting to see, you know, whether the character of all four grains actually comes through on it or not. This one is from Colorado in the Rocky Mountains. It's the Breckenridge 3-year-old spirit. It's bottled at 43% and it's distilled from 56% yellow corn, 38% green rye and 6% malted barley. So again, should hopefully be interesting. This particular one, this is from the Rocktown distillery in Arkansas. Interesting enough, when I put my tasting notes for this up on my WordPress blog, somebody, I forget the chap's name, but got in contact and said, where can I get this from? And so I had a look around, and it's at the moment not available in the UK. I got in touch with the distillery itself, because it won best non-aged, non-bourbon, no age statement, non-bourbon whiskey in the World Whisky Awards. Try saying that once you've had a few. And apparently they're you know, I spoke to the chap that sort of owns the distillery, or emailed him anyway, and was hopefully going to get some samples out of them, but they as yet haven't arrived. So I'll crack on and use this particular one. So we'll see what this one is like. It's like I said, it's bottled at 46%. Don't know what the exact supply, should we say, of that one is, but I would guess it's going to be again predominantly corn based. And finally, this one, probably the most well known of all of these kind of startup distilleries, the Balcones. Now everybody knows Balcones, everybody's heard of them from Texas. This is not the baby blue corn, which is probably their most well known of spirit, and probably the one that is, in my opinion, the most divisive of all of these. A lot of people love that sort of young, youthful intensity of character that the blue corn has. Personally, it just doesn't have enough character for me. It's young, it's spirity, it's, you know, just hasn't had time. This particular sample is not the baby blue corn. This is their new one. It's called Brimstone, and it's really quite interesting. Bottled at 53%. It's interesting because post distillation they smoke it with sun-baked Texas scrub. Well, that's going to be interesting, isn't it? I have tasted this, and I don't know. Yeah, I think the tasting notes are up on the WordPress blog. They may or may not be. I forget now. I have spurts of where I put stuff up on there. So yeah, it's going to be, you know, pretty smoky, you know. And I guess you look at it and think, well, it's probably going to cover up the sort of youthful spirit. Can't be a bad thing. I know Jim Murray absolutely raves about this and thinks this is the greatest thing to come out of America since, well, American football, I guess. Although I don't think he's an American football fan. Anyway, so you know, that will be the final one that we're tasting. So anyway, enough of the waffle. Shall we crack on with the first of this afternoon's tasting then? Right, okay, so let's have a look at the Hudson 4 grain then, shall we? Oh, sweet, huge amounts of sweet corn, fat, corny, sweet, slightly earthy. It really is pretty corn dominated. I mean, there's a little bit of earthy rye, possibly. I'm not getting much of that sort of cotton candy kind of wheaty sort of notes that the wheat tends to sort of give to these kind of spirits. It's young. It's got a little bit of sort of that rose petally mar that I often find with younger spirits. Certainly things like say Auchentoshan, for example. It's pleasant. It's got a nice dollop of caramel, little bit of little bit of sort of pepperiness coming out now, which I'm guessing is probably coming from the rye, which is, yeah, it's getting a little bit earthy, a little bit smoky, you know. Just sort of giving it some aeration is certainly sort of helping that. It's bringing out these other notes to it, but it is quite fat and very corny. About it. Pretty much like the nose. It's sweet, it's fat, it's corny. But yep, there's a little bit of that sort of Mar kind of character, that youthful spirit note. Some rye does come through on the end with a real sharp pepperiness. It's a bit short, it's a bit, like I said, it's a bit unevolved at the moment, but it's kind of like almost like a whiskey of two halves. You sort of like, initially it is all about the sort of sweet corn and the fatness and the oak, and then it kind of like stops, and then yeah, you get sort of a little bit of the sort of like peppery rye coming through, but there's not a lot of length to it. It's pretty short, but you know, it's good spirit. It's just not there yet, and I think this just sort of like, you know, sums up these American micro distilleries. It's just the spirit is just not quite ready yet, and I think, you know, if you gave that a few more years in the oak, it should start to sort of like, you know, meld together more. You'll get a little bit more oak character coming through, a little bit of mellowing. I mean, you know, the spirit itself is exceptionally good. You know, it's really good quality spirit. I just don't think it's actually sort of quite ready for being put in a bottle as yet. But yeah, some other people may well disagree with me on that one. But that's just my opinion, boys. Right? Right, okay, and on to the Breckenridge, Colorado whiskey. Let's see what the nose gives us on this one then, shall we? It's quite whiskey-like actually, quite high, not high-toned. It's spirity, but not in a bad way. It's got more spirit character and a lot less oak. Earthy, a little bit of orange. It's almost, you know, you taste this blind and you probably you'd think, oh, could it be a sherry cask whiskey? It's got that kind of sherry cask richness to it, which is really, really interesting. Quite oily. Again, sort of, there's a little bit of a bite, but it's very orangey. It's very citrus. A bit of corn, bit of sort of sweet malt. It's actually quite a pleasant nose, I think. Again, not the most complex of creatures, but you know, for 3 years old, I think again it shows that the spirit is very, very good. It's interesting. Yeah, quite oily. It's getting really oily now. About it. There's a lot of oak there, a lot of that toffeed oak, some fat corn, sort of all comes up front. A little bit then of sort of like green spicy rye, not quite, not peppery. It's got a greenness to it, which may sound daft. I mean, that's called green rye. I imagine it's green rye. It's sort of under ripened, but it has that kind of green kind of feel to it. It is a bit short, but again, then you get sort of like the corn coming back on the finish with a nice bit of sweetness. it's pretty well balanced. It's pleasant enough. It's a bit simple. The aftertaste is a little bit on the sweet side, but you know, again, I don't think there's any denying that the quality of the spirit of that is pretty good. So again, it's just a bit young. You know, it's just sort of not quite all there as yet. So, but pleasant enough. Right, okay, let's have a look at this, the third of the samples from the Rocktown distillery in Arkansas. Let's see what the nose gives us. God, that's pungent, oily, really intense, lots of fat corn, earthy. That's really fruity as well. I mean, it's kind of got this kind of sort of almost kind of new worldy Shiraz kind of black currant, big oak, lots and lots of oak. That sort of almost, you know, creamy kind of winey sort of oak. God, it's a big nose, big spices. Lots and lots of vanillins, really creamy. It's an intense nose. I mean, yeah, it's young, but it's just got more than sort of just the one dimension to it. This has got sort of more character, and yeah. God, that's an intense nose. Getting quite smoky now. And again, it's just that fruit, that huge chunk of sort of like, you know, almost Australian sort of winey black fruits and creamy sweet oak, little bit of linseed, bit of pepper. God, that for such a young spirit, that's really complex. I mean, I know that the distillery are currently having talks with a UK importer, so it's, I don't know where that conversation is at this present moment in time, obviously, because I'm not privy to that. But I'll obviously endeavour to find that out and see, because I really want to get some more samples of this stuff. I mean, I know they do a rye. I think they do a moonshine, and they do a smoked hickory smoked bourbon as well, which I'm guessing is probably going to be something similar to the Balcones Brimstone, in that it has the smoke sort of blown through it post distillation, I would guess, although I don't know, and I'd like to do a tasting on that. So so if you're watching, you know, get the samples to me. Anyway, back to the whiskey then. Gosh, it's got vanilla ice cream now. It's just like, oh my god. This is just a huge nose. I mean, it's not obviously in the league of, say, George T. Stagg. I mean, it's not there. You know, but it's got pungency, intensity. You know, yeah, I like this. Time to taste the palate then, I think. God, that's got some alcohol, even though it's only 46%. God. Smoky, intense, toasty oak, rich fruit. Again, that sort of black fruit kind of character. Some fat corn, but buckets of rye. Really intense, spicy, peppery. Grab you by the nuts kind of rye. That is intense. That really tastes like that's a lot more than 46%. It has to be said. The aftertaste is creamy oak, and like I said, more of that sort of Australian sort of black fruit. You know, yeah, that's amazing. That really is pretty impressive. It has to be said for something that's quite young. There's a little bit of a little bit of, you know, youthful spirit character, but oh, that is intense. I mean, God only knows what the hell they do to that. That is really impressive, and like I said, I mean that was you know no age statement, non-bourbon American whiskey of the year in the World Whiskey Awards, and you can see why. I mean that was pretty damn good. It has to be said. A real mouthful. Getting a little bit of dark chocolate, a little bit of bitterness, I guess, at the end. But wow, that's one hell of a spirit. That's impressive. Right, okay, and with the taste of that one still in my mouth, let's do the balcones then. Right, so this is the brimstone. This is the smoked whiskey. Apparently, they say it's a guarded secret how they do it, but I've been told that it's essentially they pass this, pass the smoke through. Bit like how Chase do with their smoked vodka that they did a few years back. So let's see what this one gives us then, shall we? I mean, it's an interesting nose. It is really interesting. You get lots of this sort of like burnt wood, scrub, a little bit of burnt green wood, but underneath it is this just oily, youthful, corny spirit, basically. I mean, yeah, it's different. It's interesting. It's lots of burnt wood, lots of burnt green wood and stuff like that. You know. I mean, I like it. It's got a little bit of astringency to it, a little bit of herbalness. But that's obviously the focus of this particular whiskey. You know, there's a bit of licorice, bit of treacle maybe. You know, I mean, again, I mean the spirit is good, but it's you know you sort of sniff hard enough, and it's young, it's unevolved, it's oily, it's intense, but it is just so different. I mean, you know, it's not cheap either. That's the other thing. I mean, I'm gonna stock it, because it is. I think this is obviously something that you know if you love your whiskies, if you love your American whiskies, you really ought to taste this, because it is just like it's like nothing else. It has to be said. You know, you can argue about whether the quality of the spirit, not the quality of the spirit, but the maturity of the spirit is up there. You know, you can argue the fact that all that burnt wood is kind of like, you know, just sort of blanketing over the top of what is essentially sort of young spirit, but yeah, it's really different. It's got that sort of, it's got ferns, it's got sort of, you know, let's say green wood. It's scrubby. It's I don't know. I mean, I've never been to Texas, but you know, you kind of get the impression that it's very much of its place. You know, it's yeah, you can imagine sort of sitting around a campfire made up of this kind of stuff. You know, and all the sort of billowing smoke of various burning bits of scrub. You know, a little bit meaty, bit savoury. Yeah, I mean it's good. It's interesting. It is what it is, I suppose. Anyway, let's taste it. Burnt Wood City. Oh, green wood, ferns, bit mossy, bit kind of astringent, tar, a little bit molasses, dark treacle, wood sap, coffee. I mean, that's pretty complex actually. I mean, you know, but the complexity is coming from all this burnt scrub. It's getting really bacony now, you know, roasted meats, barbecues. I mean, it's impressive. I mean, you know, I'm not going to lie and say this is not interesting at all, because it is really interesting, but obviously the interest is coming from all this kind of like, you know, additional flavouring, rather than the, the, the flavouring coming from the actual spirit. Now, I guess you know, you could argue the fact that it is just covering up sort of young spirit, but equally you could argue that it's something different. It's something that certainly you wouldn't get away with in Scotland. You know, the Scotch Whisky Association would really have an absolute epi about this. You know, they would go nuts. This is not traditional. This is not Scottish. You know, it's like, what are you doing? You know. And so it's nice the fact that, you know, they can actually get away with doing this kind of thing in the States, and you have to take your hat off to them and say, look, you know, they're doing something different, and something, you know, unique, and why not? Why not give it a try? I don't think it's failed at all. I mean, I think if you like your peated malts, you love that sort of smoky kind of character, you're just going to love this. You're going to go nuts for this. It's just like a mouthful of, you know, barbecued meat and smoke and burnt wood, and yeah, it's all this kind of stuff going on, you know. And all right, yeah, you're getting a little bit from the spirit, but you're not getting a huge amount. It has to be said. And yeah, it's a dichotomy. It has to be said. It is what it is, and you either love it for what it is, or you're just gonna hate it completely. You know, you're gonna think it's sort of like an abomination. So, but I like it. I mean, like I said, I mean, I have been critical of their other bottlings, the blue corn and things like that, which is just nowhere near ready. And again, like I said, the spirit is just nowhere near ready to be bottled. But what they have done is produce something completely different, completely and utterly off the wall. And you've just got to say, well, hats off. Yeah, it's weird and wonderful, but it's great. Right, okay, so let's sum this up. I think this has been a really interesting tasting, and I think the thing that comes out of it, it's nice to see that there's something other than bourbon. It's not just about Kentucky, and it's not just about Tennessee. You know, there are other distilleries in the USA, from places where you just didn't expect them. You know, from Denver to New York to Texas. You know, there's distilleries cropping up absolutely all over the place, and why not? Why not give it a shot? You know, and it just goes to show that sort of it's not just about your Jack Daniels, it's not just about your Evan Williams or your Buffalo Trace. You know, these iconic distilleries that have been around for absolute donkey's years. You know, it's basically, you know, guys with a vision, that sort of want to do something a bit different. And I think, you know, all of these show that the spirit that these particular distilleries are producing is exceptionally good quality. I would argue that sort of the Breckenridge and the Hudson are just not ready for bottling yet. I mean, they really need some more time to, you know, round off the edges, get some more maturity, some more, you know, character, and they're bottling it because they have to, really. At the end of the day, they're having to get a product out there. They're probably sort of like got the bank on their backs and all that kind of stuff, and you know, you can't argue with that at all. And I suppose, from a kind of an anorak's point of view, you know, it's nice to kind of follow how a distillery is progressing. You know, you've tasted their youngish spirit, you've tasted it, and then sort of like, you know, as the years go by, you'll taste, you know, if they carry on in production, that is, you'll sort of like taste the spirit when it starts to get some more maturity. So you'll see the evolution of the spirit, and I think sort of for people that are kind of into that sort of thing, then yeah, it's great. It's there. It's brilliant. I think for your kind of average punter that is not an anorak and just wants something interesting to drink, they're not quite there yet. You know, but in saying that, you know, you've got the Rocktown Distillery. Again, it's a young spirit, but my God, that's got so much character. That's just got buckets of stuff going on. It's just like, where do you start? You know, and it is really amazing stuff. You know, for such a young spirit to have so much complexity and so much character. It's you know, like I said, you know, Phil, if you're watching this, which I hope you're going to be, get me some samples because I really want to do a tasting of the rest of your range. And you know, I hope that you know, you'll find an importer, and you know, the talks with that particular company have gone well, and they will bring in your spirit. Incidentally, you know, they're the same company that have the distribution rights for Balcones, so it's a good fit. And you know, I don't know where we are with that. So hopefully something will come of that. Balcones, well, again, it's the same thing. I've just, like I said throughout the whole of this video, their spirit is just too young. It's not really ready. But, and the big but is, this is just so different. This is just like nothing you will have ever tasted at all. And I think it's worth looking at. Yeah, it's not cheap. I know that. I don't know the exact price off the top of my head, but it's really really interesting. You know, trouble is, once you've drunk that, you ain't going to taste bugger all else after that. It is just burnt wood city. All I can just taste is green burnt wood, and it's great. You know, unfortunately there is absolutely none of it left, so I ain't going to be drinking anything else tonight then, I think. So, but you know, hats off to the distillery there. Just, yeah, it's just pushing the boundaries, you know, and it's just thankful that they're not in Scotland, shall we say. So, yeah, great tasting, really interesting, and I hope this sort of, like, you know, gives you a bit of an impetus maybe to have a look at sort of you know, American spirits that are not from either Kentucky or Tennessee. And I hope you've enjoyed this the episode of the show, and I've not rambled on too much and bored the hell out of you. So anyway, like I said, I mean, I'll obviously keep you updated on the Rocktown situation if you sort of read my newsletters and stuff like that, and hopefully in due course I will be getting in some of the some of the Balcones Brimstone. But for now, I think that's all there's left to say is good dramming and good afternoon.